Welcome all. We are in the process of going live here on the radio, but we wanted to get the live stream started in advance. And I am very blessed today to have two panelists to join me to make this experience even more memorable. But of course, this will only be memorable if you, all of you out there, if you use the chat box to participate in this conversation, because it's our intention to make this as interactive as possible. So feel empowered to go ahead and use the chat box. In case you don't know where the chat box is, it's over on the right-hand side where it says chat box. Feel free to go ahead and communicate with us. Feel free to communicate with anybody who's joined the show, because we just want to have one huge conversation going, because only then are we able to live for now. Okay, so I need to start getting ready here, just so you're aware. Let's turn this down.
All right.
Okay. Let's take a look here. Please feel free to go ahead and use the chat box. Let us know where you are, and perhaps let us know what are your impediments for living in the now. "20 seconds still, folks."
Yeah. By the way, speaking of now, it just started to rain.
I saw it's raining in your background. I need to put on these mics. Welcome all to Radio Tipping Point. And in the spirit, as we are trying to broaden our horizons, we are currently working on a live stream, because our show is about now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, but now. So feel empowered to put in any remarks that you might have tied to what our difficulties are in actually reaching the presence and living in the presence. And we will make sure that your messages are broadcasted to the world. Now, without losing any time, I would like to have our panelists introduce themselves today. So perhaps, Funke, if we can go ahead and start with you, please feel free.
Oh, so we're doing female first, yes. Okay, so hello everyone, and thank you for being on the show. My name is Funke Olatibosan from Nigeria, and I'm just going to introduce myself based on now. I'm a panelist on Now Show, and I think that's the most important thing. And I'm here to have this very lovely conversation, and I feel it's a conversation that we need to have every day, because we're living in the present, in the now. And yeah, that's to be on the show, Michael. Thank you for inviting me.
No, thank you, Funke, for joining. Mia, perhaps if you'd like to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Of course, Mike. I'm Mayor. I'm based in Istanbul. I'm a holistic design facilitator and a play wizard. I've founded a new design methodology called Design Playing, which is basically focused on a dream-based design rather than a problem-based design. And I am willing, and my dream is to help pioneers co-create the new conscious play together. Thank you,
Fantastic.
Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. I didn't realize how big this subject actually is until we made the decision to run with this concept. And I realized it's really huge. And perhaps if I could start from my perspective, and this is something very difficult for me to do, to live in the presence. Why? Not so much concentrating on the future, although I'm always thinking about tasks and what needs to be done, But I think one of the biggest issues that I have is letting go of the past. Now, the past can be something very, very close to us. In other words, what happened to us yesterday and how we actually bring that into what we're doing today. Although in essence, what happened yesterday should stay within yesterday, should have no influence into what we're actually doing today. But it doesn't always work that way. Now, Funke, you put together some really interesting comments tied to this subject. And I'd like to start with some of your thoughts as to living in the presence, and perhaps maybe let us know about how easy or how difficult that might be for you.
Thank you, Michael. So, for me personally, I feel like, I'm more of an overthinker before I realize that sometimes you don't necessarily need to have it all figured out. And the mistakes you made yesterday, yes, is very valid, but should be, you learning from those mistakes and making better decisions instead of having to dwell on regrets or, fight for yourself or beat yourself for it. And living in the present is quite difficult because I had to create like a board for myself where I set out daily tasks for me to work on. And at the end of the month, I can really see how much I've grown instead of having to set unrealistic, goals or tasks myself within 3 months, within 2 months, because in 2 months, in 3 months, I'm not the person as I am today. So why not just live in the beauty of the moment and try to, make the most part of it instead of looking onto the regrets of yesterday or uncertainty of tomorrow. So I think that's the way I live, which is very difficult. I'm not going to say it's the most easiest thing to do, but I feel like living consciously and being conscious about it is a very important thing.
I think that's very important, what you said, especially in being aware of how we are today, and would like to think that we've made some progress, that we're not the same person we were, just piggybacking on what you said, Funke. We're not the same people that we were 3 months ago, and that should be a positive element. Mir, how do you look at the subject? Do you see the ability of that reflection that Funke was talking about? Is that something that is easy to accomplish, difficult to accomplish?
I think it's about how we define it, because we are putting a lot of pressure on ourselves when we say it is difficult. It doesn't have to be difficult. Sometimes I like to spend more time in the future. Sometimes I like to spend time in the past. Um, I don't believe it's a matter of um, difficulty, but I think it's a matter of interest at that moment, because we have lived the past, right? And we are thinking of living a future. So when we're thinking of these things, the past teaches us things. There is something called in retrospect, right? We look at the past and learn from what we have done so far. In order for us to be able to do that, we need to be able to look at the past. So the past is there, I think, for that reason. And when you hold on to it more than that, it becomes consuming. And the same case is with the future. The future is an illusion. It hasn't even happened yet. We don't even know if it's going to happen or not for us. And when I look at myself going into the future and imagining things, most of the time it's fun, very fun. And sometimes it brings anxiety. Like I start imagining things that haven't happened yet, but if it happens, that I'm not going to like it. And right at that moment, I think the power of I don't know brings me back to now. Right? Anything that's coming from the past that I'm putting assumptions on top of and building a destructive future on top of it, I am going back and saying, I don't know. And that not knowing stage may be hard for some people for a certain period of time, but it's not that hard for me most of the time, because I'm pretty good at dealing with the unknown. Uh, Dealing with the unknown in the sense that it brings freedom. It brings, like, it tells me that you can be whatever you want to be. And here now, you are this, you are experiencing this. Like, there's rain. Sometimes when Funke speaks, there's crackling. Sometimes, sometimes it's hard for me to understand. This is what's happening now, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I won't be understanding Funke in the next seconds, in the next minutes, or that the crackling will go on every single time. I don't know that. It may or may not. So
Well,
now this is what
we already established that crackling is coming from Funke's heart because she's burning. She's got so much energy that there's no way we're going to stop that crackling. So I think acceptance has to be part of what we're looking at here, right?
yes, yes, definitely, yes. So
I
you know,
just sorry, Mary, just to add to that, right when we knew that there was, the crackling, we developed a solution to say, okay, instead of, having to experience this, kind of just mute when you're not speaking. So that video of it, we discovered the problem, and just like you were saying, I mean, in the moment when you know that there's something going on, it's best to always look at the situation and develop a solution, right? Like solution driven. I'm just going to mute now so I don't come again.
No worries. I worked in IT for a number of years, and what we used to say within software development, it's not a bug, it's a feature. And so I'd like to look at your crackling as being a feature. We have some comments that came through from some of the individuals that hopefully were able to make the show today. I'd like to start with a quote that came from Kimberly. Came in this morning. Often I feel that we have to do 10 things at a time, and therefore we can't focus on what is actually the most important to us. That really ties into, Mira, some of the things that you were talking about as far as the future is concerned. Funke, how do you deal with that, of so many pressures that are coming at you and trying to decide what is the most important thing?
So for that, right, what I do to keep myself calm, because it can really be overwhelming having to wake up in the morning knowing that you have 10 things to do. I think the best thing to do is to really take a moment to determine, okay, fine, if what are the 5 things that I must do today, right, to know that I have, maybe not like an accomplished day, but something that I know you must do out of this 10. Because sometimes I have carried over tasks instead of having to do everything at once and be in the midst of it. And I figured that when you have a lot of things to do and you're trying to solve everything at the same time, you end up not doing anything, right? So I think it's best to figure out the most important one and maybe focus on it. Then the other ones, if you don't have it today, fine, it's no problem. Keep working at it the next minute or the next day. And after that, that's the way me I handle when I'm being under pressure and I have too much things to do.
I think that what Kimberly's talking about is not something that's unique. I see this quite often, that there are so many impulses taking place that we become overwhelmed through time, and the ability to actually define what is the most important thing, as you mentioned, Funke, becomes more and more difficult because we have so many impulses that are coming at us at the same time that we cannot differentiate between all of these different actions that we need to complete, those different media that are being broadcast at us, and we have to defend ourselves in some fashion because it's overload. And I think that certainly for some of us, it makes it extremely difficult, not just defining the present, but actually being able to savor the present. And I'm going back, Mir, to what you were talking about earlier. But you come with so much energy and in so much optimism that I would be curious to find out your opinion as to, when we were confronted with so many impulses, how do we go ahead and keep a positive perspective?
I think the trap here is necessity and sometimes courtesy. Uh, when we feel that we have to do 10 things at a time, I also feel the same things from time to time because I'm a human being like all of us. And like I experience this, and whenever I experience this, sometimes what I manage to do is to understand what isn't a necessity for me at that moment. And rather than actually thinking about the necessity, I start thinking about what I want to do, what I actually want to do in that moment. And like, I need to do this and that, and this is an emergency, and this is an urgency, and this is something that I really need to do now, and everything needs to fit in now. But yeah, if I'm not enjoying that moment with all those things, unless I'm in actual life-threatening danger, that I like really have to do those things in order to survive, to stay alive, then I let go of some of the things, and I choose to do the things that I really want to do. And I am not choosing the things that I want to do in terms of ease, but rather in terms of my values. Like, am I curious about it? Like, is it interesting for me? Is it joyful for me? Is it bringing me any learning experience? Sometimes I go towards the things that I'm afraid of. Like, if I'm afraid of it, I think there's something to be discovered there. Let's go there. Like that I think is the combination of curiosity and all of a sudden I realize there's actually only one thing to do at that moment, which is the most important to us. And all of a sudden everything gets simplified because I have the courage to let go of the things. Like, I don't think of if someone else will be hurt by me not doing this, you know? Because not taking an action, of course, people may be offended by it, but I cannot dictate my life by how people are going to be offended or not. That's just out of courtesy. Then I am not even using my candor because I am not truthful to myself first. And if in order not to hurt somebody else, if I'm hurting my now, I think that's a contradiction. And that contradiction, for me, my truth always wins.
I wish that everybody else in the world was to have the same self-confidence that you have, Mir. I'm afraid that's not always the case. And so the question is, how do we get to a state where at least we can even contemplate some thoughts like that? Funke, do you have any ideas on that? Don't mean to put you on the spot, dear.
No, it's fine. But I feel, talking what Mary said, yes, sometimes I put myself first. But what happens in the case where you come off as being selfish, which I know, yes, all the time, we have to always come first, before having to put other people into consideration. But I mean, just like you said, you have to be in your now and try to, make sure that it's something you want to do instead of having to think of what the other person will say as a result of what you're not going to do or what you're going to do, right? That's the sense of living it now. I don't know, Mike, if I answered your question, but I think I was a bit on the spot right there.
Well, my point is that you need to feel comfortable with whatever those results will be, even if you do not know how you're going to get there. That regardless of what the results are, you feel comfortable about it. And if there's one thing that we've learned from our situation over the last 2 years, is that has on the one side, we realize how difficult it is for human beings. On the other side, I think that we have seen that people have become much more adaptive simply because they had to. They didn't have a choice. And with that, they were forced to live in the moment, which was actually the silver lining, I think, of what we've been looking at in the last couple of years. When I posed this question originally, I, of course, had a certain mindset, how I was looking at the subject. And one of the big learnings for me over the last week is some of the responses. One I'd like to go ahead and share. This is coming from Norbert. I have to add it as a ticker, unfortunately, because it's so long. And let me see if I can go ahead and start with the beginning. You could just bear with me. He was really looking at the challenges that we have in the present. So what Norbert had to say was lack of brave political leadership, lack of strategy, virtual bullshit, loss of reality, financial bubble, real estate bubble, too much work, loss of emotional connections, modern slavery, credit. That was his impression of the present. And so perhaps part of it is an escape because you really don't want to deal with the present. Any thoughts?
I
Go
can
ahead,
actually.
Funke. Okay, sorry.
No,
Please go ahead, Funke. Yeah, I'm really curious about what you say. I know what I'm going to say.
So I think, having to run away from the present isn't the problem, right? And it's not, I don't want to use the word difficult, but I will say that even if you run away from it now, doesn't mean that you won't be able to do it tomorrow, right? So why not just go ahead and, learn from it and see what the outcome is instead of having to escape from the moment and missing out on the whole, because at that time you don't necessarily know what it's going to become, right? So why escape from it when you don't know what the outcome is? Yes, very interesting, right? I guess I'm cracking again.
That's right. No worries. We know it's your heart, dear. Maya, what do you think?
I think these things can really take its toll on people, though most of them are external. Whatever happens now, when we talk about now, and we start talking about like political leadership, strategy, the virtual life, financial bubble, the real estate bubble, all these things, work, and even talking about modern slavery and credit. Like we're kind of looking at the situation from a social point of view, but that social point of view is in a way outside of us. Now I think includes mostly what's happening within us. Of course, the surrounding, what's happening around us is important, but the importance of it comes with experience. What you can really experience now and what you are imagining to be happening at that moment are two completely different things. So maybe there is some brave political leader somewhere around the world we don't know. Maybe there is a brave political leader right sitting beside you, sitting right beside you. But you don't know. If you're not experiencing that, you cannot say there is or there isn't a brave political leader if you are not physically with your presence at that moment of time, not experiencing it. So I think this understanding of now revolves around a very tiny circle which is just based around us. Like how I perceive now is just here and now. Once you diminish the idea, it becomes a larger concept. Like, I don't see any leaders around me right now, other than me, you, and Funke, Mike.
Not
So,
necessarily in that order, by the way.
so when we're thinking about other people being in other places, that is not now already. Because I don't see anything about them. I don't experience anything about them. The things that I hear about other people is also not my experience of now. It's the things that I'm hearing. It's not my experience. I think there's this differentiation that people, um, most of us, have lost along the way. What I hear is what I experience, but it's not. Even when somebody tells me something that I don't like, that thing that I hear is not my experience. What I experience is what it triggers within me, the emotions that it triggers within me. That is my experience. And most of the time, those emotions and those triggers come from my past or come from my anxiety of the future. That's not even now. So when I really focus on now and really focus on what I am hearing, the exact words, and try to identify why I am being triggered this much from this, then I can understand me. And that's the most important thing. I need to understand me in order to be able to live in the now.
And that requires an ability to be able to step away from what's taking place in front of you and trying to determine, is this real or not? That's what I'm hearing from you. Or is this something that somebody perhaps is trying to convince us of? Or possibly are these impulses activating some sort of triggers that go take us back to the past, or perhaps bring up some sort of anxiety tied to the future? What do you think,
So
Funke? Do you think I'm on track?
Yes, I think I'm so much very happy to hear what I'm saying, and I feel grateful, right? But I think yes, like Bert said, it brings a trigger of when someone tells you something very emotionally, something happening in the past, or something that you think will happen in the future. But really just to have a pause right there to decide. I would say, decide if you really want to process that thought or not. If really you think this fits well with you, but in the very present where you are at that time, like determine if you really want to process it. And like you said, it's not your experience. Because someone told you something doesn't mean that you are the one experiencing it. It's just a conversation that happened. So in the very moment, do you really want to process it? Do you want to go back into the past to really have a thought, or you just want to say, okay, fine, you know what, I'm just going to this or do you want to go? And I really like the way Mel described it, or sometimes go to the past to really make some decisions. Of course, look at maybe like a repeated pattern and how you can work on it now, and don't go far beyond that, because the moment you do that, it just moves for you.
And I know that Mir understands.
have we just lost Mike?
I think we lost
We,
Mike
we took
now.
we took a commercial break, obviously, or the internet decided to take a commercial break. But what I wanted to state, and just to clarify things, Funke, it's not that because I don't agree with Mir, but he understands that if I'm going to challenge his thoughts, that these are terms of endearment that only show that I care about him and I appreciate his thoughts. And that's the extent of my now, just to make sure that that one's clear. Speaking of now, we do not want to make this conversation or leave it as a threesome, but rather we would like to have you involved. So please feel free to go ahead and use the chat box and let us know what you are thinking about, what these challenges are from your perspective of how to live in the present. And I would like to perhaps highlight another one of the comments that we came up with. This one's coming from Tom. And Tom said, the ongoing and growing uncertainty in various aspects of life. Now, obviously, I see a certain commonality between all of these comments that we've received so far. This idea that more is better, that the more that we do has to make our life better, which we know is not the case. And in fact, from that of what both of you were saying, it's almost like a contradiction, that we think more is better. And of course, the ability to be able to take in all of this information. So that was quite interesting. And Tom, in case, I know that Tom wasn't able to watch today, but perhaps when you get a chance to watch the video, I'd like to thank you for your comments. I'd like to move on to another comment. This one is coming from Rebecca. Planning everything and controlling the future is the impediment. Funke, you're shaking your head in disapproval. Please speak your mind, dear.
The future can't be controlled, right? And I'll relate it to when someone offends me, like to support someone says, I can see that react, right? And that reaction is based on me allowing that person's words control how I react to the person, right? And it's just the future. The moment you get overwhelmed by something you can't able to control, and by that you don't live in the very moment because you think tomorrow, what will I do tomorrow? But you're never sure if you're going to do in the tomorrow. And I think I read a book, I can't remember because I don't think I and it was saying, it was saying, the moment you think that we can actually control what is coming ahead of us, and we're not really living the life we're supposed to do. Because out there's a lot of things. Tomorrow you can wake up and something else happens and it's not even what you really plan for. So controlling the future is over there. You can't really control it. Yes, you can wish to say, the very moment now, this is what I think, the next 2 months I'm going to achieve. But trust me, in that future, you won't even be 10% as you are today. So why control what is planning and controlling the future? That's why I was really excited, because you can't control it. I don't know if I'm wrong, but
no, it's not. It's an illusion. We think that it's a false sense of security that we plan for the future, assuming that by planning for the future we control the future, which couldn't be farther from the truth. There was another comment that just came through. I'd like to go ahead and highlight. This is coming from Niharika. I hope you pronounce your name perhaps properly there. Anxiety about the future, not accepting the present reality is a reason why people keep thinking about the perfect future. There's always living in the future, which robs them the joy of enjoying life. And I'm sure, Mir, that you have something to add to that of what was just posted here.
Yeah, Niharika is actually one of my mentees.
Okay. Fantastic.
Basically this illusion, like you said, Mike, and also Funke, that we can control the future is basically coming from not accepting the present. Like we want to change the present. Of course, changing the present is an option for the future. for a better future, we can decide that we will do certain things differently. That's always an option. But changing the present because you are not accepting it is, in a way, an escape. Because we don't want to be in the present now. And if you don't want to be in the present now, there's no place for you to be because you can only be in the present. The past is the past, the future is the future. You're neither in that place. Like you're nowhere outside of the present. So that's the only place.
I had to post out of what Norbert mentioned already because I think that looking at these two perspectives tied to that mirror of what you were saying really brings the point home because he's describing a present that actually none of us really want to live in, right?
Yeah. Well, is that the present that I am living in? I wouldn't say so. I may have a different present than what he is experiencing. And people can have different presents because even though we are connected this much through internet and through news and all these different news channels, we're still experiencing a really limited circle of experience. Like the things that we hear are not the things that we are experiencing. And I want to give an example to this. Like let's say Funke, for example, you and I are sitting in a room and chatting, and all of a sudden you say, I am bored. So let's say this is the reality. This is the thing that I am hearing. I can think that, oh, Funke is bored because of me. Oh, I am a boring person. Oh, yeah, I've always been like this boring person in the room. I'm sometimes not getting people excited. And I can think of my past and all my previous experiences where I bored people and all these things. And I may feel sad because of this. And all of a sudden, I may use an aggressive tone towards you, saying, like, yeah, why are you being bored? Like, I didn't do nothing. But, like, the only thing that you said was you were bored. And that's perfectly fine. So even if in the same room we can experience this from what we hear, imagine what we are experiencing from the things that we are hearing from all over the world. Even the things that we are not even experiencing. Because like in this situation, I was in the same room chatting with you. That was my exact now. But with all this information coming all around us, like we're looking at Instagram, seeing all these beautiful images of people living in whatever places. And I'm looking at it and I'm looking at my life and I'm feeling sad that I don't have that life. And is that my current reality? Is that what I'm really experiencing? Isn't there anything that I'm grateful for? And I think gratitude is the key towards acceptance of now. What am I grateful for in this moment? Like right now, I'm really grateful to be able to chat with these two beautiful, like-minded people. I am really grateful for all the comments that are coming, that are enriching our conversation so that they get involved. So all these things are beautiful. I'm even grateful for the crackling sound that it brings joy to our conversation, that we can transform it into something that we experience it in a joyful manner. I'm really grateful for these things. This is what I'm experiencing now. I don't know what you are experiencing. I don't know what other people are experiencing, but I am not experiencing the lack of political leadership. I am not experiencing that.
I think was very interesting, Mir. There are a number of things that you mentioned. One of the most pronounced was building a false association of something that you hear or you see to feel that you automatically had something to do with whatever was taking place. Because a lot of these actions happen at the same time, but there's no correlation between them. They're just happening. And we have this need to always build this correlation for some reason. I've noticed this quite often in talking to people. There might be I might be reading something, and all of a sudden I'll have this funky look on my face, and they will think that it has something to do with them. I run across this one quite often at home, actually. And actually, I'm just having some thoughts that have nothing to do with what's taking place in front of me. This my own world, but people have this need to build this correlation, and I don't know why. Any ideas why? Funke, please.
I think we have to bring awareness because not everybody really wants to do that. Yes, I think the best thing to say is people think the world like if I'm having my own experience, it has nothing to do with why you think I'm living differently. It's just every experience. And God doesn't mean you are the one born, right? But people feel like everything someone else does or a reaction or something has to do something positive. And they feel so stressed out and feel that way to think that everything someone else does, revolve around it. So they take off on every single reaction, statement made, someone else's experience and how they're living their life. You don't know what, they might be going through, but of course, like, social media is like a place where everyone posts out their success. Not someone posts out, the bad side. But you are experiencing the good side in a negative way instead of, just like, oh, they just said, having their own experience and this is what you're experiencing at this time, not having to do with someone else. So I think sometimes it's the matter of people think everything revolves around them and every reaction, every statement they think they have to do.
Maybe it's almost egotistical that we think that everything is revolving around us instead of actually realizing that not everything has something to do with us. Very possible. I never even thought it from that perspective. Thank you for sharing that thought. Speaking of thoughts, there was another one that just came through. This is coming from Ada. Living in the present is great, but if we only live in the present and not be a bit anxious about the future, then how then do we better equip or prepare ourselves for the uncertainties of the future? Mir, I'm sure you have an answer to this one.
Okay, so this question in a way has the assumption that we need to prepare ourselves for the uncertainties of the future. And let's go with that assumption that, okay, let's say we need to prepare ourselves for the uncertainties. How do we prepare for uncertainty? How do we get prepared for something that is unknown? The only way I think that we can be prepared is to increase our flexibility and our ability to deal with the unknown, to accept that it is unknown. That is the only way to prepare for it. And of course, like I said, certain times we spend time in the future in our imaginary mind, and we spend time in our past to learn from it, because it's in our innate ability to design our future, to change our behaviors, our habits towards living a better future for ourselves. And that ability comes from us being able to see what can happen in the future. But that can happen is not the representation of everything that will happen in the future. And it's also limited by our perspective. The higher we can open up our perspective, we can see more clearly that there are limitless options. But That's the reason, basically, why we work on ourselves, because this is the only thing that I can change at will. And by changing this, I can change the world around me.
Mm.
So maybe that's the way to prepare for the uncertainties of the future.
I would argue that when we think about the future, it's always based on the present, meaning or our interpretation of the present or what's taking place around us right now, because one, we cannot base it on anything else. We do not have crystal balls. And if you look at through history, anytime you would have, say, for example, a World's Fair, where they very often will pose this question, what will the world look like in 2100? And that it's always interesting watching these events that took place maybe 70, 80 years ago and how they expected our world to be like today. And it's quite funny, quite cute, because you realize by looking at it from that perspective that they are basing clearly on their present and not on something that could have been the case today, showing that not necessarily that the exercise is futile, but it it's almost like throwing darts. You might hit the bullseye, you might not, but in essence, it makes no difference at the end. I think that part of the problem that we have with the future is trying to make sure that, I think the reason why we try to manage it is because it's this false sense of security, because it has to fit this image that we have of ourselves, which in my mind is the real problem. We might not necessarily always have a positive image of ourselves. So we try to base the future on this unhealthy view that we have of ourselves, and that ourselves could be the individual or it could be the cumulative, the way that our things are going throughout the world, for example, kind of piggybacking on that of what Norbert was talking about. And with that, we are not looking necessarily for a brighter future, but we think that to control the future is better than making sure that it's bright. And that is unfortunately what I see quite often. We have some other comments. I'd like to go ahead and make sure everybody's given a choice. This is coming from your mentee again, Mir. Niharika, that's very helpful. Gratitude is the key to being truly there in the present. Pushing yourself to be better is good if done for the right reasons. Of course, we appreciate you actually being part of the show today. Let's move on to another comment, if I may. This is coming from Ordomita. I think life and happiness is a journey, not a destination, and we are in control of our journey. And I think this has everything to do with the present. Funke, your idea on this concept?
Actually, working with my direct manager.
Great.
Yeah, so and just to put sense on answers about the future and thinking with this, okay? I remember a few months ago, I had to resign from a very good company, great team members, just because my mom was sick. And it took me like a week to really make that decision, because I had to, in the moment, table out my options. My mom is sick, of course, I won't be able to function when I work, because, I just have to want to be at work, I want to be at work, and it was really meant with me mentally. And I feel that, yes, I was really anxious about the future of what is going to happen with the next 1 month, what is going to happen with the next 2 months, how am I going to do this, how am I going to do that? But I tried to pause, and I'm like, if right now my mom is still alive, and I still want to push through all of this, I'm grateful to be alive. And that's why, because I'm grateful, I need to keep her alive by letting go of something to really figure out what it is going to be. Just to tell the other point of when you have a sentence to do, how exactly do you pinpoint the one that you want to collect? So is by being grateful, yes, being happy of experiencing something, and not always thinking something is really coming at you, but really living through. And I can say that in 1 month, I grew beyond my expectations, right? I pushed myself every day to not make that decision the greatest success of my life. And I feel that is the greatest part of it. Living every day, yes, you're anxious of the future, yes, you're conscious, yes, you're curious, yes, but you can plan for it, but you can't really, just have a few because it hasn't even happened yet. Which I understand that. I mean, living every day, being conscious, happy, and just taking things as it comes, and knowing that it's just like everything is joy of living.
And we have another comment coming from Oreofe. Yes, living each day grateful for at least one thing and then going on to do at least one thing to improve on yesterday is enough to daily life happily and productive. I'll call this the focus of one. Ha, isn't that funny? Because 1 second. In preparation for the show, I dug out something that I read maybe about 15 years ago, maybe even longer, and perhaps you might be familiar with this gentleman. Let's see if I can hold this up properly. The Power of Now, coming from Eckhart Tolle, who was able to make it to the States and get involved with Oprah and made a huge career based on precisely this concept that Oreofe is talking about. And this the focus of one, when he was talking about the power of now. And for me, we're talking about the same thing. We're really talking about the same thing. I need to tell you a story of something that is taking place right now with me. I'm working on a project. And it was very interesting, of course, getting ready for the show today. As is very often the case, things either work out or they don't work out. And I'm thinking the whole time, but I have decided that this is the way that things are going to work. And of course, they don't always work the way that you think that they're going to take place. And I realized that for me, it's tied to this concept called a sunk cost fallacy. And perhaps you might have heard of this concept. Let me explain it to you. Sunk cost fallacy means I've invested so much so far that I cannot stop. I cannot stop moving in this direction. And so today I had a call with somebody, and I was, I'm piggybacking, Funke, when what you were talking about in being able to bring these things into the present. And I realized, so is the goal to be able to say, well, I said it's going to happen this way, so it happens that way? Or is the goal to make sure that it's meaningful? And congratulations, Mike, you were able to decide that meaningful wins today. So I thought we would appreciate that. And in fact, things happen in a way, and I'm trying to close a couple different loops here. We have this idea of how we expect the story to end. And because we are so concerned about the story ending this way, that we do everything possible to make sure that the story ends within this concept that we have in our heads. But one, it does not befit reality, which I would think that if we're living for now, we're talking about reality. And secondly, it doesn't ensure that whatever we're doing, that it's effective, because you know more today than you did yesterday. So why do you use yesterday's metrics to decide what's going on today? That was the end of my rant. Maybe give you both a chance to comment maybe on something that you might have heard so far.
Well, I would like to add something. Which I would love to add something, which is, this is mainly one of the reasons why I moved from problem-based design towards dream-based design, which is when I look at people, when I look at businesses, when I look at organizations, when I look at communities, whenever there is a decision to be made, whenever there is a new design to be made, whenever there is a change to be made, people got used to being motivated from the urgency of a problem, of a trouble, of some imaginary life-threatening situation. It's always like there is a fire and we need to escape. Let's run away. This is how we get motivated. And rather than doing this, I prefer people and myself, that's how I deal with things, to get motivated through my dreams, through my curiosity. So that's the key that I am doing. And if I am willing to change something, I am using my curiosity, not my fear. And if I'm willing to preserve something, I am using my peace. Whatever I am at peace with coming from my past, I like to preserve that. Whatever I'm curious about the future, I like to change that. And both of these things can come from fear hiding itself. Like, I don't want to be here because I'm afraid of being here. So I escape, so I change as if I'm curious towards something, but I am not. I am afraid of change because I don't know what's going to happen. So I am at peace here, but that peace is hidden under the name of comfort. So it can be hidden, that fear can be hidden, but we need to understand ourselves. That's the reason why we need to look within to feel and know that we are living in the now.
Greg just do the now.
Speaking of now, the show is reaching the 2-minute level, and so I'm glad that you were able to move into avatar mode, Mira, because I think that's very important. That we need to make sure that we have a call to action to everything that's taking place. Apologize for maybe the sound not always being the best, but as it is in life, very often we try our best and we do not hit 100 every single time. But one thing I'd like to mention while we're still on the air here is that, like anything that's meaningful, you cannot predict how things are going to turn out. And there were certain things that we talked about today that were, for me, extremely meaningful. They never would have happened. I'm firmly convinced they never would have happened had we tried to plan this. The spontaneity in our conversation allowed certain things to come out that wouldn't have otherwise. I certainly wouldn't have talked about what took place for me this morning, because I probably would have thought 5 times about it, and I'd say, well, people aren't really interested. And I decided, well, whether people are interested or not, I'm just piggybacking me on what you talked about. Whether they're interested or not, I'm going to go ahead and throw it out there. And if people find value, great. If not, then that's fine too. And part of that acceptance is being able to go ahead and complete that. And I have reached the 40-second period. I'd like to thank everybody listening to us on Radio Tipping Point. We'll be back, of course, next week. Stay safe and make sure, as we have in Vienna, you make sure your FFP2 mask is still on, because we're required to do that, and we follow orders always, right? Okay, thank you very much. And we'll stick around with the live stream for a couple more seconds. And I wish you the rest of you a wonderful rest of the day. Okay, folks, so the radio show is over. Yeah, I thought there were maybe kind of piggybacking on some of the things that I heard throughout the conversations. There was a continuity I felt in everything that we were talking about. These outside impulses that infect us quite often, that deflect us from understanding what's actually happening in our now. That was a clear message I heard quite often. The ability to take a step back and make sure that we're defining our now and not something that's being imposed on us. The confusion that comes from so many impulses that are coming through, that one was very pronounced. What are your thoughts? What were the big takeaways from your side? Funke, how about you?
I think my big takeaway is not everyone really knows, what it feels like living it now, right? So sometimes it's okay to talk about it, but some people cannot really relate because they just feel, like the abstract. Yeah, it's really abstract to them. And what I've come to realize as well is you need to learn to unlearn. But the process of unlearning is very major into it. Some people are so used to being futuristic, being, anxious about the future, being projecting into the future, or living in the past, like the past mistakes or past experiences. They don't know how to proceed from there, and they make decisions right now based on, those past experiences. So I think the issue sometimes is a lot of people don't know what it means to really live it now. Like if say, okay, live it now. How do they really break free from, especially they're already used to break, more so like agents to go out to really bring this that moment of, what, you can actually break it from the circle that maybe it's holding you back to do something great and, doing it the way you're supposed to do that.
Okay. Mir, how about from your side? Or the avatar formerly known as Mir?
I think I am still thinking about actually the idea that was put by some of the in one of the comments, that anxiety is a necessity to deal with the uncertainty of the future, and it wasn't phrased like this. Yeah. So I believe every emotion is there for a reason. We have the capacity to feel every emotion for a reason. Though I don't believe in the necessity of emotions. They are not necessary for us to become aware of something. They are there to help us learn, figure out what we have done, what we can do, understand our present moment. And the reason all those emotions that we are feeling may be something surprisingly different than we think that they are for. So I think all these assumptions that we are making, or generalizations that we would be making towards any kind of an emotion, would be a disservice to that emotion. I think we all need to look at our emotions right then and there and understand what it's trying to show us, because it may be trying to show us something different. But I don't believe in the necessity of an emotion, which is an uncomfortable emotion, we might say, for understanding the future or designing the future in a better way. I think designing the future comes from curiosity, like I said before.
And there's a word that we haven't used so far that you talked about indirectly, Mir, and that is the word vulnerability. To what degree we are capable of living in a vulnerable situation, and that's okay. That we're able to accept that, which means that you have to have a certain amount of strength, inner strength, to make that one happen, which is the key. And I think that was another one that was quite clear in all of the many of the messages that we received today, is that that control that we're looking for has everything to do with protection from that of what's coming from the outside, not necessarily understanding that the real power is to be found in the way that you're able to deal with things from the inside. For me,
You
that's
know,
a big takeaway.
yeah, the thing is, like, if I knew every single outcome of my actions, like, if I knew the future exactly, like, if I could really control the future, life would be so boring and, like, so, mundane. Like, it would take out all the fun out of it, all the joy out of it. Like, that not knowing is actually bringing us joy, bringing the fun, the surprise element. Otherwise, like, there would be no surprises for us, and, like, we would be, okay, yeah, I know my life, and, like, as soon as we were born, we would know our lives. And, like, that is so boring.
I heard the crackling. I know, Funke, you had something you wanted to add to this.
I think, I think what Mary said, I think people are not adventurous, right? Like, if you know everything that's going to happen, if you're planning, you have a strategy that's going to work as planned and everything. I mean, just like you said, when it happens, oh yeah, I know that was going to happen. So when really the fun in having to, and so hard, people that are able to plan for this future, challenge and everything, doesn't mean that it goes as planned. I'm sure at some point they'll be like, oh, we never saw that coming. And that's the fun of it. If only they relate for that uncertainty to know that, oh, even just how you're planning or your curiosity or your uncertainty, your anxiousness, something will still come out of nowhere and you will eventually have to because you can't say because you already planned for it, that means you don't take it when it happens. It's fine.
No? Cool. Thank you. All right. I'd like to thank everybody who attended this live stream today. Thank you very much for your comments. Thanks for indulging in our ranting. Sorry, I'm only talking about Mir right now. I just wanted to clarify that. No, I'm just kidding. No, thank you very much for attending today. And of course, Funke, Mir, thank you very much for being part of this conversation, and look forward in some fashion of continuing what we're talking about very, very soon, because I think this is extremely important and we need to talk about these things if we're ever going to make any progress. So again, thank you very much for joining today and look forward to our next day today. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. And may I please